Well, I hope today that you've had, if you like, a good catch-up, a good breadth of exposure of the work of the MRC Epidemiology Unit and the inspiration that Peter has been to all of us throughout that time. And so, Peter, it's now time for you to summarise the day. Please.
Catherine. Yes. Can I suggest you go and cancel the dinner? I'm so full of thanks and gratitude. It has just been wonderful, and thank you. Thank you, John. Your suggestion and your suggestion, George, that there would be an event, I was totally taken by surprise. And it's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. The joy of meeting people, some of whom well, all of you I've loved. I'm quite an emotional person, and I really feel there's meaning in those hugs that I gave. And I have a tremendous admiration to feel that I knew some of all the speakers today, and just feeling, why was I so privileged? I'm enormously privileged to MRC. The long-term security and the funding and the prestige that MRC has amongst the people and colleagues meant that suggestions were received with great interest, suggestions for collaboration. And we had a huge group of collaborators in different studies. I don't doubt if I could list them all now, but almost every study. I delegated the work to the Andrews, the Janies, the Barbaras, the Liz, the I delegated the actual work. And of course, in the end, I got the credit for it. But I had the joy of going to colleagues, our first study, the Caerphilly cohort study, 35-year study. I saw my role in that to go around every senior person in the University Hospital of Wales and say, we're setting up a long-term study and we're well funded by MRC. Are there any hypotheses that you would like us to include? We can take blood, we can make measurements, we can add a questionnaire. And there are countless studies by colleagues where they wrote something on thyroid disease. I didn't understand what they were doing, but they got blood and they got information from us and so on. But the main study that we focused on in that study was healthy living and the benefits of a healthy lifestyle. And I put that even above aspirin. The lifestyle in the community is deteriorating. It was bad when we did the study, it's even worse now, nearly 50 years later. And yet there are huge, robust and strong relationships with diabetes. 70% of new diabetes in the Caerphilly study could be attributed to the unhealthy behaviors. There are benefits, huge benefits, a 30% reduction, 60% reduction in vascular disease and stroke, benefits in cancer, and benefits, we were the first to publish, on dementia. And there was a substantial reduction in dementia in those who had lived consistently a healthy lifestyle. Just a little mention, cancer was not significant. Richard Peters' talk on the large data sets. I learned my lesson on that from Richard in the very early days on aspirin. And Caerphilly was only 2,500 men, and we had a small study of women following that. But it wasn't enough to show a relationship with cancer. So we got data from Biobank and we checked our figure and it came out as exactly the same. The reduction of a healthy lifestyle on cancer is about 35%. I could go on and I could tell you about studies of lead pollution. I could tell you about a study of tropical fish put in hard water and in soft water. Cochrane loved that study and he insisted on paying for the tropical fish and the various equipment for it. But I could tell you about a lot of other studies, but I would like to share with you my disappointments. I loved research. I felt a tremendous responsibility because I was so well funded by MRC. And I have a tremendous emotional involvement in all the studies that we did. I think we set very high standards, and I was insistent that every worker met those standards. And I was immensely proud of the pleasure I had in working with the team sustained me, let alone the sense of achievement. But I'd like to share with you my disappointment. The two main areas that we worked on was aspirin, and you've seen the success of aspirin in vascular disease. But around the turn of the century, there was evidence from Peter Rothwell and others that there was also an effect on cancer, a considerable reduction in the risk of incident cancer. And he had the inspired idea, how I wish I had had it, to revisit the aspirin trials for vascular disease, and by flagging the men with ONS, get their deaths. And he showed a very marked reduction in incident cancer and in cancer mortality. We decided to focus around that time. We decided to focus on treatment of cancer. There was evidence in Peter Rothwell and other studies of incident cancer that those who had metastases, in other words, had active cancer, when they were admitted to the vascular trials, had a huge reduction, whereas those who came in a healthy state had a smaller reduction in cancer. So for the last 15 or so years, my little team has been working on aspirin and cancer. Is Richard Peto still here? Richard, I know you won't like it, but I am deeply convinced that aspirin is effective in cancer. We have done a series of observational studies. Now, Richard, I know you'll turn off at that point. Only randomized control trials. I didn't ask you any question. We have done systematic reviews of the published work on aspirin, and there are a few randomized control trials, but there are at least 118 observational studies. And they're not entirely consistent. There's high heterogeneity, but the overall effect is a 20% reduction in deaths, cancer deaths, or all-cause deaths in those 118 studies when we include 18 different cancers. So I haven't retired yet. We're planning at the moment a further study in which we do another literature search, a systematic literature research, and a meta-analysis. And we will focus on the cancers, the less common cancers, in which there seems to be no randomized controlled trial planned. And we hope to publish this and say, we've shown the safety of aspirin. Our very first meta-analysis examined in very great detail the safety of aspirin. We used fatal bleeding as the index of safety or non-safety. And we showed that there was a reduction in fatal bleeding in people on aspirin. Now, the reason for that, we put forward a hypothesis why that is so, why there's this significant reduction. The risk ratio is only 0.45 for fatal bleeds in people randomized to aspirin compared with those randomized to a placebo. So given the safety of aspirin, we've also written to every person, an author on every paper on aspirin and cancer. And we've asked for their comments on the safety of aspirin. And we wrote to every single author and asked for details. Not all replied, but we got no expression of worry about the bleeding or and particularly the fatal bleeding. Now, we set very high aims for that. And if I may read to you the statement that we adopted as our aim. Aspirin is inexpensive and readily available in almost every country. Its promotion could benefit both the affluent and the indigent within developed and undeveloped countries, so that a truly global impact against cancer could be realized. Professor John Chia, a highly innovative oncologist, works in Singapore, and I flew out to Singapore to see him. And we discussed that, and I got that from him as the aim for our work on cancer. But we have failed. There's controversy, and to our knowledge, there is no patient who has started on aspirin because of our work. The other failure is in the Caerphilly study. The main aim we had was to reduce unhealthy behaviors in Wales, and time has shown that we've had no effect at all on the relentless increase in unhealthy behaviors. So I have not retired. I hope to do some further work, but I'll delegate most of it. But can I tell you, and I tell you this with great sincerity, I became very emotionally involved in work. And I refused to retire because I felt there's still an opportunity for me to help in research. And I got tremendous comfort from the wisdom of Solomon. And I find, and still to this day, have great comfort in writing, Solomon's writing in Ecclesiastes. I thought about all my labor, which I had taken under the sun. I should leave it to the man that will be after me, and who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool, yet he will have rule over my labor, wherein I have labored. All this is vanity. A quotation from Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament. That has sustained me and challenged me, and I commit what we have done to the man who shall follow after and will have control over our labors. But I still go on in hope that there will be a greater effect on public health and public well-being than we have already achieved. I've loved working with some of you. I've loved hearing you. I've admired your work. Thank you for this wonderful occasion. Unexpected, but absolutely wonderful. Thank you.